Evening folks, I thought I would do you a little video to explain obviously that we have a new job retention scheme guidance that's been sent out today. A bit rude of the government to do it on a Saturday. I think every HR consultant in the country will definitely be thanking the civil servants for that little Saturday gift. But you know, guidance is guidance and we can't complain. I still don't think this will be the final guidance though folks, but probably the final one this side of Easter. So hopefully you can see the screen, so you can see that obviously we've got the updated guidance in front of us. And I thought I'd just talk you through some of the key points. I'm not going to talk you through all of it because you can read. The online service is not available yet. We expect it to be available by the end of April. I do hope they're right. I do hope they're right, and that you'll be able to do April payroll and claim this back very, very promptly indeed. You know, any employers who are struggling to think about how they're going to obviously make payroll in April with the furlough arrangements in place, obviously do need to speak to their banks and obviously do need to speak to them about whether they can offer any assistance. Alternatively, one option is obviously to ask the staff to accept a delay in receiving their wages. You know, possible, not going to be necessarily easy, but possible. So again, you know, do obviously as the weeks go on, if you do identify this is going to be a problem, do come and have a chat with us. Obviously, it talks about the fact that the furlough scheme is there if you cannot maintain your current workforce. You can furlough your employees, and it talks about obviously the detail. It talks about the scheme starting on the 1st of March, maybe extended if necessary, but obviously we do need to obviously bear that in mind that it might not exist after 3 months. Key things that obviously important. You must have created and started a PAYE scheme on or before the 28th of February. Enrolled for PAYE online. This can take up to 10 days. And have a UK bank account, because obviously some overseas employers have been looking to obviously furlough UK-based employees, so that's important. That's been stressed, and as we knew, all entities can apply. Apprentices, well, we already believe that apprentices could be furloughed, but they've provided some more detail. Important here, obviously, any time they spend training. So if you have had communication from your training provider, like one of my clients has, about the expectations of apprentices whilst they're furloughed, then obviously you will need to obviously ensure that they receive the national minimum wage for all the time spent training, and obviously this is important. So there is separate guidance available, and obviously if that appeals to you, no, it wouldn't appeal to you. If that is relevant to you, then obviously do look at that second section and do get in touch if you've got any questions. Bit about public sector employers, I think we didn't already know there. Again, we do have clients who can't claim because obviously they are funded in the private sector by public sector money in order for them to operate their services. A bit about nannies, which again, I think some people had asked the question about whether nannies could be furloughed if they were on the payroll on or before 28th. Talked about whether the administrator will obviously be able to take part in the scheme. They obviously didn't expect that to happen. We are very desperately sad by the news that Kath Kidson possibly will go into administration. Any of you that know me well know that I have a Kath Kidson handbag problem. Well, that's what my husband calls it. So yeah, I'll be devastated if we lost Kath Kidson. But yes, it does look today like they might be about to call in the administrator. So the employees you can claim for, you can only claim for furloughed employees that were on your PAYE payroll on or before the 28th of February 2020. This is to prevent fraud. Employees hired after cannot be furloughed and claimed in accordance with this scheme, and they can be on any type of contract. Foreign nationals can also be furloughed, which again was believed but not necessarily explicit before. You cannot do any work if furloughed on or behalf of the organisation, which includes providing services or generating revenue. So obviously, give those staff that are not going to be furloughed those business critical business tasks to undertake. So if you have got somebody who's not going to be furloughed and you're going to furlough the payroll officer, then that person works from home and does the payroll, and the person who would have previously done it is furloughed. You cannot furlough your payroll and then ask them to run payroll. That would be working. While on furlough, the employee's wage would be subject to usual tax and deductions. I think, again, we knew that, and it's just been formalised. So obviously Martin Lewis will claim that this section is down to him, but employees who are made redundant or stopped working for you after the 28th, you could re-employ them, put them on furlough and claim the wages. Well, we already knew that. That was one of the things that was said to us in the previous guidance, that obviously you could, that's why it starts from the 1st of March. You could obviously change your mind about people's status in March and obviously then put them on furlough. Remember, this scheme was announced on the 20th of March and by then people had still lost their jobs. People did lose their jobs that week. If your employees are on reduced working hours, then obviously no. If they've been put on short time, they're not eligible for furlough. We knew that. If your employees on unpaid leave, you can only claim for employees that started unpaid leave after the 28th of February. So if somebody has taken unpaid leave, you can furlough them, which we knew you could. Whether you choose to furlough them, again, will be down to the business to choose. So if you've got people who are on unpaid leave because they just don't want to come to work, and that is actually happening, people are saying, look, I'll see you later, is literally what they're saying. And then, you've agreed authorised unpaid leave. In those cases, you could furlough them. But again, you might not want to. As I say, that the issue you're going to have is that you've got to fund this, and you've got to fund this before it's reimbursed. If your employee is self-isolating on sick leave, then obviously they'll be able to get SSP, and obviously you can't be furloughed when you're receiving SSP, which we knew. You can claim for furloughed employees who are shielding. This is what's important. If they are also stay at home with someone who's shielding. So this is important, obviously, in terms of children who may well be in receipt of a letter, or family members. So you could have somebody that lives with a husband or a wife or a partner that has had a letter and they need to stay at home with them. You can furlough them. And again, that's important. If you would otherwise had to have made them redundant, you can furlough them. So again, it's not helpful the way they've worded that. It's not necessarily the best way for them to word it. If employees are unable to work because they have a care responsibility resulting from coronavirus, then they can also be furloughed. Again, children who need to be looked after can be furloughed. Again, not been clear, have they really, in the way they've worded that? Is that children who might be poorly with COVID-19, children that might be at risk of COVID-19, which might be in this one, in the one above? Or is it because due to COVID-19, we've closed the schools? We're not entirely sure. But again, if any of you have got parents who said to you, look, now the schools are closed, I can't be at work, potentially they could be furloughed if that's something you want to do. If your employee has more than one job, and again, we really expected the government to, or the HMRC, to recognise that this was not a good idea. Morally, someone's been furloughed. Does anybody really think that they should then take another job that could be going to somebody who's been laid off? Is that really a good idea? But the HMRC have said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. You could be furloughed from each job, which we knew from the previous guidance, or if each job is separate, the cap applies to each employer individually. So somebody could be furloughed from 2 high-paying jobs and receive £5,000 a month. The employee can be furloughed in one job and receive a furlough payment, but continue to work for the other employer and receive their normal wages. So that's the 180% that you'll have heard me talk about. So you could receive 80% from one job and 100% from another. And again, this is benefiting from the situation. I'm sure that's not what the HMRC intended, and it's not what the scheme was set up for. It was to stop you ending up in big trouble financially, yet people will be able to profit from this. If your employee's on a fixed term contract, then obviously they can be renewed or extended during the period of furlough, and we would recommend that. Doesn't break the scheme, and we recommend that to be a good idea. If it's ended because it's not extended or renewed, you'll no longer be able to claim the grant for them. So that's right. So when they've ended, you won't be able to put in a grant for them. So that's again for you to choose whether you wish to extend a fixed term contract so that you can continue to claim their 80%, or whether you wish to end their fixed term contract during the period of furlough. That's fine. Eligible employees who are not employees. There's a lot of guidance on employees that might not be employees. The ones we're really going to introduce you to is company directors, because I know there's been a number of questions about this. So as a company director, my light's about to do something strange. I don't know. As a company director, yes, you can be furloughed, but you can do no work. So you cannot do anything which generates revenue or provides services for the company. You can do the very narrow brand of activities which comes under the Companies Act, which is obviously the statutory duties, so filing the returns that you have to do to Companies House, really narrow, really tiny band of things that you might have to do. So obviously that's something that should be considered. You might have a team of directors and decide, right, okay, we will furlough several of them. The key thing I'd like to say to you is, look, it's got to be done, noted by the board. It's got to be in the company board minutes. Those records have obviously got to be maintained and kept. They will be open to be examined in the future. So board meeting needs to be held, a decision made to who to furlough, and then those individuals communicated to in writing that the board has determined to furlough them. So if you're not in the habit of having board meetings, you're not in the habit of obviously adopting this as a decision made by the board, you're going to need to do that, even if it's a board of 2. Talk about contingent workers and LIMB workers. There's lots of detail in here. If your employee does volunteer work, so let's go to that one. So you can take part in volunteer work. Obviously it's encouraging, isn't it, if in society people are volunteering, particularly for the NHS at this time. I said to one of my clients this week, your staff members could come back with a greater skill set than they left with, having had the opportunity to volunteer. And if you think about it, some of the roles that they might do for you would make them perfect as volunteers for many sectors that are busting at the seams at the minute. If your employee undertakes training, obviously it's a good idea for employees who are furloughed to undertake training. No better time for us to watch YouTube videos, upskill ourselves, learn new things, read. Really, really good time to do that if you're furloughed. But ultimately, if the employer allows that, that's fine, but they mustn't be doing any training that was there to generate services or provide revenue for the organisation. And we can encourage. So we can say, look, here's the online stuff that we pay for. We encourage you to use it when you're being furloughed. That's absolutely fine. Where training is at the request of the employer, so if you demand it, if you require it of them, you have to make sure they're receiving the national minimum wage, which we already knew. If your employee is on maternity leave, well, we already knew that you can obviously do that. And you can, if you play enhanced, then obviously that can be subject to furlough as well. Agreeing to furlough employees. So discuss with the staff and make any changes to the contract by agreement, which is obviously the agreement we've all been making use of. Obviously really important to say that. To be eligible for the grant, employers must confirm in writing to their employee, confirm they have been furloughed. And that's not the date you told them about it. That's the date from which they have been furloughed. And you must keep it for 5 years. So that detail was not available until today. You do not need to place all of them on in furlough, but those you do cannot undertake work for you. So it's stressing it again and again, isn't it? You cannot do any work. I definitely have got a poltergeist in here today, haven't I? I told you about Fred. So how much can you claim? 80% of the employee's wages, up to a maximum of £2,500. Do not claim for the worker's previous salary. I'm quite sure what they mean by that. Minimum automatic employment pension contributions on the subsidised wage, which obviously is what we already knew. You can choose to top it up, but you don't have to. Employees must not provide any work, again that. And obviously grants will be prorated if your employee is only furloughed for part way through a pay period. Well, that's interesting to know, but again, it has to be 3 weeks. Claims should be started from the date the employee finishes work and starts furlough, not when the decision is made, which again, I think we knew. The way you work out employees' wage is different depending on the type of contract they had. Now, this is really, really important. If you've got somebody on a salary, which many of you would, it's the salary as of the 28th of February. So if their wages have gone up, if their salary has increased in March, I'm afraid that they're not going to get 80% of that increase. They're going to get 80% of their salary on the 28th of February when it was known to HMRC, they're going to get 80% of that. And that's got to be made very clear to employees. This is what the law is, well, not the law, this is what the guidance from HMRC is saying. And we've got to understand where that's coming from. They do not want employers to put their staff up, their wages up at this point, and then be able to obviously benefit from an increased wage, therefore coming back from the government. Because there was people talking about, well, put them up 20% and then they'll get 100%, if you like. We'll do this fudge. So that's what that's all about. Let me just switch off this light before it troubles me. I spent the day cleaning today, which has no doubt meant I've knocked something. Oh, yeah, I think I had knocked the lamp. There you go. It's not very slick here, is it, folks? I tell you, that's why I don't record professional slick stuff. And then we've got the standard stuff about the pay that varies, which we all know about, and you'll have seen James's little spreadsheet showing you obviously how you can calculate average monthly earnings for the previous tax year when they don't actually have worked all 12 months, without taking into account obviously the nil payments, because obviously that was important for you to be able to compare the two, same month last year or the average. Talks about the national insurance and pension contributions and what you can claim for. Again, this is interesting. Detail about, again, really crappily worded, bless them. Whoever wrote this bit, really crappily worded. What on earth is past overtime? Because you're not doing overtime now. The only thing we can assume they mean is the concept that overtime is guaranteed. And I don't think any of my clients probably have got guaranteed overtime in their contracts of employment. But you might have compulsory commission payments. So this might be this notion that you're a state agent and obviously you earn commission, that sort of environment. I don't know, car dealerships perhaps. So that's good. Your 80% can be based on that because you might have a really low basic, and that's really important, but nothing discretionary. So nothing like tips and commission that might be obviously earnable in terms of obviously, I suppose you could have a compulsory commission payment if you were a recruitment agent as well. So anything like that, commission payments that are variable, that aren't to do with the contract, they can't be claimed towards the 80%. Reference salary should not include the cost of any non-monetary benefits. So benefits in kind like company cars and that sort of thing. Again, they've provided some detail to say, look, that they're not interested in gym memberships or anything like that. National minimum wage. So the whole section on here about the only really entitled to the national minimum wage when you're working, which we know that your furlough is not when you're working. So obviously, you know, that's important obviously for people who might do training and might be required to do training. We knew that from what we've previously been talking about, haven't we? What you'll need to make a claim. Again, they've expanded on that. I love this. Employers may need to seek legal advice on the process. Yeah, well, that's obviously the first bit, but you're going to need probably legal advice in terms of obviously to make those processes happen. This is where the real advice is going to be. I thought it would be hard enough to be a HR consultant in March. I wouldn't quite really fancy being an accountant in April. I don't know about you. So you're going to need your PAYE reference number, your E1, the number of employees being furloughed, your claim period, start and end date, and that might differ. You might have different people who've started furlough at different times, the amount to be claimed, obviously with the minimum length of a furlough being 3 consecutive weeks, your bank account and sort code, really important. That's obviously they can make sure that they put the right money in the right account, and you will need to calculate the amount you're claiming. Oh dear, that's a sadness. I really hoped that the portal would be so clever that it would do it for you, but no, by the looks of it, you will need to calculate it. They are going to have such resources available to them, aren't they, to make sure that people haven't claimed a penny more than they're entitled to because the sums involved. And they said 5 years, didn't they? So for the next 5 years, we can expect people to be coming out and audit. And I think they're particularly going to pick on small businesses because they do not trust. They really do not trust. And so, yeah, this is going to be something you're going to need to make sure you've got your claims right. Retrospectively audit, yeah, I bet you are. You'll make your claims using the amounts in your payroll, either shortly before or during running of payroll. Claims can be backdated. If appropriate, workers' wages should be reduced to 80% of their salary within your payroll before they are paid. This adjustment will not be made by HMRC. So, ultimately, you're going to be processing this potentially and paying it out and then waiting to get it back. Minimum furlough periods we already knew was 3 weeks. We've always assumed you could rotate. And it's something I was talking about on a video on Friday. But yes, it's very clear when they return to work, they must have taken off furlough. Employees can be furloughed multiple times. So thank you, HMRC, for clarifying that. But in each instance, it must be a minimum of 3 weeks. So it doesn't mean that the gap between furlough has to be 3 weeks. It means each time that you are furloughed must be a minimum of 3 weeks. The HMRC will check the claim, and if you're eligible, pay it to you via BACS. You must pay the employer all of the grant you receive for their gross pay. No fees can be charged for the money that is granted. So yeah, no thinking that you can charge people for taking part in a furlough scheme. They have to receive 80%. They have to receive everything you receive, and obviously then subject to tax and then at their end. When the government ends, we don't know when they'll end it, but it will process all claims before the scheme ends. Well, thanks for that. When your employees are on furlough, don't allow them to do any work. They've stressed that a few times. Employees still pay the taxes at their wages, including pension contribution, unless the employer has opted out or stopped saving into their pension. And I do hope none of you are encouraging people not to continue with their pension. But obviously, if the employee chooses to, then that's absolutely fine. But don't be the one that encourages it. Still have the same rights. Obviously, this is important. Grants can't be used to substitute redundancy payments. We'll talk probably on a future video about what happens if you do need to start consulting with your staff about possible redundancies whilst they're furloughed, which can take place. Working for a different employer, which we've talked about, if contractually allowed. If contractually allowed. Now, for many of my employers, a second job might not be a problem if it's not in the same sector. But another full-time job bloody well would be. So, this is where we're going to have to see what we can do. If an employer who takes on a new employee, the new employer should ensure they complete the starter checklist form correctly. And if they've already been furloughed, they should complete statement C, which is basically saying I've got other job. Ultimately, the HMRC will be treating that as therefore taxed without a basic rate, without any tax-free allowance. Tax treatment of the grant. Any payments received by a business under the scheme are made to offset the deductible revenue costs, and therefore it is income. So, another reason why, I suppose there's lots of reasons why I'm cross with Martin Lewis. There is lots of reasons. I get that what he's trying to do, he's trying to be really popular with people. But that includes business owners, and it's hard to be a business owner right now. And I say that as a business owner, it's hard. Being responsible for other people's mortgages is hard, If you choose to take on somebody who left you, and if they left you, say, in early March, take another job, and that job fell through, I am sorry that your job fell through. But if I took you back on and furloughed you, any money I receive, I'll pay corporation tax on that as income. You might suddenly have 2 years service if you come back to me. That then means that if I have to lose you in the future, and I might, then, I might pay redundancy payment out of my pot, out of my own pot. I can't reclaim that. I might have to be concerned about unfair dismissal, which I wouldn't have done if you'd have stayed gone. You might well claim discrimination or protected characteristics, or you might become pregnant. All of these things that might happen. And so I'm ever so sorry, but if you're left, you might need to stay left. And I don't want you to make me feel bad as an employer for saying, I'm sorry, I won't take you back and furlough you. Rant over. Anyway, folks, I hope you're digging the ponytail. I have been cleaning for 6 hours today. I promised myself I would do anything other than HR. And then obviously a little bit left over of the Waitrose Prosecco, and here I am recording you a video. Anyway, I wanted to take you through the now 10 pages, not 5.5, 10 pages of the new guidance notes. And as I say, we ride again on Monday morning, folks. Take care. Bye.